In this module, we have covered the demand side and supply side semantics and its equilibrium conditions. We also touched upon curve shifts and movements along the curve, and the equilibrium prices and quantities triggered by the shifts. To start off, demand curve was introduced by aligning customers' willingness to buy at different price points. The table of two customers' demand at different price points. It was then established that the market demand refers to the sum of all individual demands for all consumers of a particular good or service. X-axis is the total demand and Y-axis is the price. Then, the law of demand for formally established, other things remaining equal. The quantity demanded of a good reduces when the price of the good rises, and quantity demanded of a good increases if the price of good decreases. That is, demand is inversely proportional to price. Then, the determinants of demand were considered. Income. If the income levels increase for the town's customers, they will be willing to buy more fans along with other goods for a given price. The demand curve shifts rightwards if income increases and vice versa. Prices of related goods. Two categories were identified. Substitutes. When a fall in the price of one good reduces the demand for another good for a given price, the two goods are called substitutes. When price of a substitute product declines, the demand for the main product declines too. That is, the demand for the main product shifts left if the price of the substitute product declines, and vice versa. Complements. When a fall in the price of one good increases the demand for another good for a given price, the two goods are called complements. When price of a complementary product declines, the demand for the main product increases, and vice versa. Expectations. Changes in future expectations may lead to a shift in the demand curve. Example, an expectation that prices would rise in the future would lead to a rightward shift in demand now. Changes in tastes or preferences. Then, the concept of supply curve was introduced. The supply curve was established based on survey with a handful of suppliers. What quantities the suppliers would be willing to produce at different price points. Then, the supply curve was drawn which measures total quantity supplied versus price. Then, the law of supply was formally introduced. Other things equal, the quantity supplied of a good rises when the price of good rises, in other words. Quantity supplied of a good declines when the price of good declines. Then, the determinants of supply were introduced. Prices of raw material inputs. Higher the raw material input prices, the lower the supply, owing to lower margins. Hence, a higher price leads to leftward shift in the supply curve and vice versa. Technology. Better the technology, higher the supply, owing to better efficiencies of production. Hence, an improvement in technology leads to rightward shift in the supply curve and vice versa. Expectations about future. Example, possible expectations of rising competition might disincentivize current supplier's production and expansion plan, resulting in lowering output as a whole in the market. So, possible expectations of rising competition may lead to leftward shift in the supply curve and vice versa. Then, the equilibrium quantities considering both demand and supply curves were discussed. The equilibrium point is the point where the demand meets the supply. At this point, the customers are happy with the price they incur to buy table fan, and the suppliers are happy with the price they receive for sell. Then, the situation where the market is not in equilibrium was considered. Excess supply or surplus. Market not in equilibrium. Quantity demanded is lower than quantity supplied. This happens when the prices are higher than equilibrium. Suppliers are happy, but the buyers are not. Here, the suppliers would be saddled with excess inventories as there are lesser takers. This would propel them to reduce prices to get back to the equilibrium price and quantity. Excess demand or shortage. Market not in equilibrium. This happens when the prices are lower than equilibrium. Quantity demanded is higher than quantity supplied. Buyers are happy, but the suppliers are not. Here, the bargaining power of suppliers increases, and they increase prices till it reaches the equilibrium price and quantity. Then, the impact of shift in demand curve on equilibrium prices and quantity was considered. If the demand curve moves to the right, the equilibrium prices and quantities both increase. Then, the impact of shift in supply curve on equilibrium price and quantity was considered. When the supply curve moves to the left, that is, the equilibrium point shifts to higher price and lower quantities. Then, the possible shifts in demand and supply and their impacts on equilibrium prices and quantity were summarized.